I think I tried red bush tea when I decided to like cut back on caffeine, and someone
Yeah.
recommended it as a replacement for just regular tea. But I just missed coffee too much, so I ended
Yeah.
up just slipping back into old habits.
I shouldn't have coffee really, but it's the one concession I have to, well, it's not even a bad diet actually because there's probiotics in coffee beans. So it's actually quite good for your stomach in kind of small quantities. So that's what I tell myself anyway.
If I leave out the part about small quantities, I'll use that as my excuse next time someone complains I'm having too much coffee. Fantastic. Then we'll slip into it, and welcome to the podcast, Lizzie.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very
It's
welcome.
it's really nice to be invited. I just wanted to say that I've got noise sensitivity, so I've got a real issue with podcasts, and there's so many that I'd like to listen to, but your voice is so soothing and so suited to it that it's yeah, I just had to say that before we kind of moved on, really. It's certainly for the noise sensitive among us, it's yeah, it's great. So I'm
Don't
glad
you
you
blush.
exist.
It's, you're not the first guest who's mentioned it.
Right.
It's one of these things where I don't think there's any particularly interesting about my voice. I think I have quite a nasal voice. But then obviously you hear a higher register inside your own head compared
Yeah.
to anywhere else. But I've had a couple of people once said, it's very soothing to the point where they can't listen to the podcast because it makes them sleepy. And I was
Yeah,
like,
I get that a lot. I'm like that with a lot of podcasts that I do listen
hmm,
to actually, because I tend to listen to them while I'm working. So I'm not actually kind of registering what I'm listening to, if that makes sense. So
yeah,
I often have to go back and, listen to podcasts a few times really. So yeah, but
yeah.
yeah, you did a great job.
Well, we'll start with the basics as we do. Who
Okay.
are you?
Oh, um, I'm Lizzie and I'm a clay artist, but I go by the pseudonym Clay Disarray. Really because Lizzie Campbell is a fairly common name, particularly in Scotland. So I think it's really useful at times to try and, develop your own moniker. So it's something that I came up with around 10 years ago. I'm really neat as a person, or I used to be. And when you're working with clay, it's certainly not working or like working with pencils or pens or digital work because everything's just so messy. So yeah, my little studio that was once really neat and tidy is yeah, just got loads of stuff everywhere. So hence Clay Disarray, really. That's where the kind of name was born.
Oh, it's interesting. I don't associate clay with tidy in any way,
No,
shape, or form. I associate it
no.
with, accidentally getting mud on my jeans and messy hands and all that kind of thing. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's quite a
yeah.
counterbalance to your own
And
personality.
it's, I think because I've got so much kind of mixed media stuff around as well, it's
Mm.
yeah, it can be a bit tricky trying to kind of create some kind of sense and order to my studio. It's only kind of a small bedroom really, but it's my creative space. So yeah, that's where the name came from really. It's yeah, pretty messy. So I'm glad you can only see this bit this bit here.
So you can see my background is just a cacophony of bits. Tidy's
Yeah,
not something I particularly do. It's more clear a space for what I'm making at the time I'm making it, and then leave it be afterwards to let it sell.
that's the creative mind for you, I think, isn't it? So
I mean, I cleaned my kitchen this morning. That's now tidy. I give it
that's
maybe
enough.
2 days before it's cluttered again. But
Yeah.
so are you based up in Scotland then? You
No,
just
no,
mentioned.
I'm my family are Scottish. I was born in the Midlands and I live in a village that's pretty close to Coventry. Um, so yeah, I've been here most of my life. I did have a little while I lived in London, but yeah, back here now. So it's kind of semi-rural where I live. So, it's for me, it's really great for kind of mental health, for kind of getting out and, just seeing fields and woods and stuff. I really love it, I have to say. It's I find it kind of a bit kind of all consuming when I can't get out and, just kind of be at one with nature, if you like. It's
I
just really
appreciate it.
important for me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm originally from Scunthorpe, and then
Oh, right.
I moved to Lincoln after that for uni, and then stayed there for a decade or so, and then recently moved over to the US. So having
Yeah,
quick access to farmland and woodland is something which I grew up with and fully appreciate that when you get into a city, not having that is a nightmare.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's coastal as well, Scunthorpe. So is
Yeah,
it?
fairly
Yeah,
coastal. Like
yeah.
it's not on the coast as in the sense it's connected to the sea.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, I've
Because
yeah
Grimsby's in the
misremembering
way.
that.
You know, we
Yeah.
we have to deal with Grimsby. Yeah. But we've got the
It's
Humber.
just
Humber's close.
yeah. It's just because I'm kind of really landlocked where I am at. I think that's the one thing that I'd change if I could just be a bit closer to the sea. Really, it's yeah.
It's a
I
very
just
different
love it.
vibe on the sea. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'd really like that. I think sort of long term, that's what I'd sort of love to do, but I'll have to speak to my partner about it.
Retire to the coast is not
Oh,
a
wouldn't
is not a bad
everybody?
plan.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be lovely.
It's slightly different when you're in the UK and you retire to the coast because you know it's going to be chilly most of the year round, whereas out in the US
Yeah.
it's retire to Florida where it's warm all year round and we've got sea and sun.
Whereabouts in the US are you now?
So currently I'm in New Jersey, but I'm literally across the river from New York
Oh,
because
lovely.
I work out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been here about a year now.
How are you finding it?
It's all right.
Yeah.
It's okay.
It's fine.
I've had this with guests, and I think I mentioned it in previous ones. Of I'm English. I describe things in very demure terms. Of it's
Yeah.
okay. You know,
Yeah. Just pragmatism, isn't it? It's fine.
it is what it is. Like you're saying, like I was concerned of not having access to parks and being able to get out into the wildlife and trees and stuff like that. But because of the way the spaces in the city and New York are built, there is actually a fair amount of parks and there is a fair amount
Yeah.
of places you can go because if there wasn't, it would just be concrete 100%
Yeah.
of the time. And
Yeah.
that's, no way to live. There's
No,
no way.
it's no good for the soul, I think. Certainly the creative soul.
Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, getting back to what you do in terms of your work. So I found you originally via Instagram
Right,
through
okay.
your images and whatnot, and then looked up and obviously found that you had a YouTube channel and you create work, and I found them interesting because it was you seem to obviously not only create things but give more of an insight from kind of an industry perspective, which I think a lot of
Yeah.
channels miss. And I wondered kind of what led you towards that, as well as talking about your own work.
Um, I think it all boils down to not well, I think to give you a little bit of my history, I when I was younger, I lived with my dad. My mum died when I was young, and I had a bit of a kind of fraught relationship with my dad. He had a kind of alcohol problem, and it was kind of really difficult living at home. And I desperately wanted to go to art school, and it was yeah, it was quite difficult to get to art school. I did go. I signed up to, I think it was a graphic design diploma course when I was about 17, but because things got kind of so difficult at home, I had to leave the course halfway through, and I moved out of home because it was just too difficult. And I basically had to, go and find my own way in the world. And I've, gosh, had so many jobs along the way. I tried to count it up the other day because just for something that was kind of semi-related, and I think I've had around 30 to 40 jobs in my life, which it tells you something, doesn't it? It's basically somebody that's just not happy, really.
Yeah, they're
And
quite fit.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I ended up working in the charitable sector, which I really enjoyed actually. I ended up in a comms role for a national charity, but there was just something still nagging, at the back of my mind. It was like, this job is, it's semi-creative, it's really interesting, but I just don't feel creatively fulfilled. So um, I thought at that point, you know what, I'm just going to go and do a part-time visual communication course. And that was at Leamington College, and it was fairly local to me. So I thought I'd do that for 3 days a week. And I think it was about 3 years. And gosh, it was just like breathing air, really. I just felt so inspired, not only by the course itself. My tutors were just brilliant. And everybody on my course, I did worry about kind of being a mature student at that point, that I'd kind of sort of stick out like a sore thumb, really. But so I think I was in my kind of mid-30s at that point, and everybody was just so lovely. I just remember just absolutely feeling so excited about going along. And because it was a multimedia course, I kind of covered everything. um, I went into that course thinking that I was an illustrator, because I've always drawn in my life. But I think the issue for me was that I'd oscillate between sort of different creative styles all the time. I'd do cartooning one day and then kind of more figurative work another day, and I just couldn't fathom what my style was, or my kind of creative identity was, because everything that I was doing kind of felt really derivative of kind of everything else out there. um, so it was during that course that I did a clay workshop, and I don't know, for whatever reason, I just seemed to have a real kind of natural affinity with the material. It was something that I'd never kind of done before. I think I might have done a bit of pottery kind of years ago, but this was kind of creating characters, and it was kind of like a bit of an epiphany, really. I was like, crikey, if I could make characters and then take images of the characters in different settings, then that's kind of still illustration work, but it doesn't feel derivative. It feels original. It feels like, it's something that I feel kind of really excited by. So I just remember that class. It was a, I think, a day workshop being a real kind of pivotal moment for me, because I think for my next brief, I think there was a photography brief coming up after that, or a module, and I just created a load of um, like film scenes. The project was called May Contain Spoilers, and I just made loads of different sets for various kind of horror and dark genre movies, because they're the ones that I'm kind of more drawn to. And I think I created maybe around 40, and they were really raw. Part of the brief was really about keeping it as kind of small as possible in terms of time. So I'd limit myself to just a few hours for each kind of mini projects. But it kind of had its own charm because of that. I used air dry clay and then painted over the figures, and um, it just. I guess now I'd look back and think, gosh, that was really terrible work, like everybody would. But just remember at the time thinking, I've not seen anything like this. This feels really kind of unique. And I developed a kind of mini photography book. But yeah, I was just so proud of it at the time. And I just, developed from there. I think not long after that, I discovered polymer clay. And I don't know if you're aware of what the material is, but it's more of a kind of plastic. So it's a clay that you hard bake, and I don't know why it's called clay actually, because it's really not clay. It's like a
Plastic ball.
plastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and since then, I think that was probably around 10 years ago. I've just kind of developed my own kind of style, which is it's very cartoon like, but yeah, for me it just feels good to be creating things that feel kind of unique, really. I think there's lots of obviously clay artists out there, and people doing brilliant work, but I think um, because of the kind of illustration element, I just really wanted to do something that felt kind of different, really. And I think because of that, however, it often gets kind of confused with animation work, and I've been really kind of distinct along the way that I'm just more interested in creating still images, and I think that probably speaks about my patience, really. I just couldn't work on an animation. It takes way too long, and I haven't got the kind of interest, I haven't got burning desire to do that. For me, it's about kind of creating just those images that, yeah, and that's in a long way, that's how Clay
Oh, that's
Disarray was kind of born, really.
yeah. I was just going to say that's interesting because I was going to ask you kind of what your interest in like animation and stop motion is because there is such a similarity. The first thing it reminded me of when I saw it was the Sledgehammer video from Peter
Yeah,
Gabriel, which was that I always talk about that one because it's the one which kind of inspired me to want to go into like filmmaking and things like that. 'Cause I was like, wow, this is incredible.
it's
But
amazing, isn't it? It's iconic. Yeah,
yeah, it is that kind of claymation plasticine-esque style, which obviously was the way back in the 80s. Whereas now, obviously, there's things like polymer clay, which just didn't really exist back then, and now
yeah,
can hold up for those kinds of images. So it's interesting to hear that you don't have that want to kind of go further because to you they are standalone pieces, they're individual, iconic, moments, and that's what you're
yeah.
capturing.
And it
Yeah.
has caused problems along the way because a few years ago I signed up with a illustration agency, and it's a really good illustration agency, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe they want to sign me. Um, but really, not long after, it was uh, it was really apparent that they didn't get my work because they thought, it'd be really interesting, it would be really good if you could start making little models on armatures that, can be animated. And I thought, it's a very different technique for one. I don't know how to make things that are articulated. It's a hugely different discipline. And, if I were to start doing that, that would, probably take 3 years to learn how to do that in itself, really. It's a very different kind of skill set, far more complicated in many ways. So yeah, it was soon after that I thought, this kind of isn't working. Yeah, I said to them, this, I need to go my own way, really. This, yeah, it just shows, doesn't it? Sometimes that creative agencies, you really think they get your work, but actually sometimes they don't. So it was unfortunate, it would have been nice to kind of partner with them and to get more work because that's, essentially what creatives want to do. But yeah, I think it can be tricky if you're doing something that people don't kind of fully understand. Um, it's not to say that I haven't done any animation work. I have done some very, very basic stuff for an app in the past. And that, I don't mind so much. It's, if you're making a character blink or something like that, something really, really simple. But when you're kind of creating fully formed animations, it's a hugely different thing, really.
I guess your style, if I was to put it in the animation industry, is more of kind of like a concept model
Yeah.
style when it's like
Yes.
the initial idea. It's kind of the same with illustration of when you do a concept sketch and it's big and it's wonderful and it's fantasy and all these kinds of things. Then you hand off that to people who actually do animation. They're like, yeah, this isn't possible. Like
Yeah.
what you've designed is just not possible in terms of what we can
Yeah.
do. Um, but no, yeah, it is a fine line to walk, and I think a lot of creators fall into that. Not necessarily a trap, like you say, because it's all done in good faith of looking for institutions and companies to help.
Yeah.
Finding an agent is a big thing, especially for writers. That's a huge thing. Find an agent who will publish a book. That'll be the the open door. But you
Yeah.
end up changing what you're doing to fit the person you're working with.
Yeah, well,
And
I didn't get any
yeah,
work out of them. You know,
yeah.
I ended up, the only brief that I had was for a charity, just to, you know, essentially, I don't mind doing a free gig now and again for a charity, but you know, if that's the only gig that you're getting from an illustration agency or a creative agency, you know, it's quite apparent things aren't working out really.
Yeah, as well, like hearing your story reminds me so much of people who have had very similar journeys of working in, multiple jobs, not finding anything which really fits, deciding to go back to education or doing something, and
Yeah,
ending up in the creative industry. because
yeah,
because we all come from various backgrounds, and more opportunities are there, or like you say, life gets in the way of,
yeah,
of doing something. And then you end up drifting from job to job to job, I think. And then it suddenly opens the mind, like you say, you have that epiphany moment of, oh, actually, what fulfills me is going out, making something, creating something, and that would be nice to do day to day, even if it's just like in a minor capacity.
yeah,
um,
absolutely. And it's, you know, my story certainly isn't unique. It's just a shame that, you know, creative people, if they just had that bit of support when they were perhaps younger, you know, it'd be really brilliant for them to be able to, you know, to discover their talents years or decades earlier, really. It's yeah, it can be really difficult for all artists out there that haven't got, you know, that familial base or family base that are, you know, encouraging them for one to go into something that, you know, fulfills them creatively. It's yeah, it's a real shame, I think.
I think there's an extreme value as well in people who are older changing direction, like
Yeah,
yourself. Because like kind of previously alluded to, like within your videos, you discuss industry, you discuss, knowing your worth and pricing and all those kinds of things, which
yeah.
as young creators, you don't really think about. You get 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, you just don't think about it. You're thinking, how can I make money from this? How can I get exposure, and how can I, make it big? That kind of
Yeah, you're
thing.
just pleased to get a gig, I think. You know,
Yeah,
in the early days, I was just really flattered. And, you know,
yeah.
if it paid or not didn't really matter. But now I'm horrified to think, you know, why on earth would you take a free gig on? Why? But it's just what they expect. It's so awful.
It is. I mean, the example I always give is I've been to more weddings as a employee than I have as a guest.
Right,
And it was
yeah.
because it's very much Graham knows how to use a camera. He's studying how to use a camera. Therefore, he's the default wedding photographer for anybody. And I think it's like you spend the entire day there and maybe come away with 200 quid,
Oh
you know.
gosh.
And it's that kind of thing where you're like, yeah, no, this is good. I'm practicing my craft. It doesn't matter that
Yeah.
I'm not really getting much out of the fact that I didn't get fed on the day or anything like that. And
Oh,
you
it's
just don't think about
horrific.
it.
It's horrific. And I think everybody has their own story to tell, doesn't there? Which says volumes.
Yeah.
It's just so commonplace, and I just can't believe it's just expected. It's just just awful. And it takes, you know, a long time to get the confidence, one, to sort of say no to people, and, you know, to actually realize this is just so exploitative. They can promise you whatever they want. It's just not going to work out. You know, I've done things for exposure in the past, and, you know, if you're lucky, you might get, you know, your name checked or whatever. But so what? These people see, like, you know, a social media handle and they think, oh, whatever, yeah, that person did it. But, you know, I'm not going to follow them. I'm not going to offer them any work. It's an absolute waste of time. So it didn't take me long to realize, you know, why on earth would you do anything for free? I think I certainly it was still while I was at college, you know. But yeah, it's been a long time, other than charitable work, that, you know, I've done anything for free because it's just ridiculous. It's so awful.
Definitely. I think unless you're doing it, I mean, I do a lot of stuff for free, but I do it for myself. It's stuff
Yeah,
which I want to make. It's stuff I want to give away. Stuff which I see value in just having out there. It's not.
Yeah.
beholden to a stakeholder or a CEO or anything like that. And I think that's the stuff which you focus on, you work free.
Well,
But like you say,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well,
having
doing
that,
YouTube for one is doing work for free,
yeah,
isn't it? It's
yeah,
certainly for me. So it's but I just enjoy it really. So it'd be nice one day if your channel pops at some point. But I think to go into it with that mentality isn't going to work out. You have to enjoy it at some level, and if things work out, then great. So
yeah. I definitely think when you get that older perspective, that's the important thing to see. It's important for people to see that and come in because anyone can watch us and say, oh, both a bit jaded with the industry, who've given up or anything like that. And he's just saying, well, no, most of this is formed out of experience. It's formed out
yeah,
of the things which we've done for jobs, for whoever, creative or not. And we've gone, well, no, I do enough to make my living. And
yeah,
then I do the stuff which actually makes me happy. That's
yeah,
a clear differential. But yeah, it can be hard to teach that. And
yeah.
I guess that's why I started watching your channel more because I was like, oh, it's nice. You're actually giving these messages to kids, so to speak.
Yeah, whether or not they take them on board is a different thing, I think, isn't it? I think sometimes people do have to go out and learn their own lessons, but I think it's equally useful for people to be, sharing any kind of knowledge or wisdom, particularly about the creative industries, actually, because there's just so much hidden from certainly those that are new to the industry or recent graduates. Nobody's got a clue about pricing or how to get clients, whatever. It's all just so difficult, and it's I know because I did a degree top up in visual communication, so I did 4 years study, and not once did we ever talk about clients or how to actually get work. It's just seems crazy, really. It's because I
That's
think
the insanity
all
of it. Yeah.
creatives often have their own small business, or often outside of their day job even, but not knowing how to run that business is a real it's a real problem. So it'd be nice to think that creative courses would introduce modules that really deal with this stuff properly, because it's like a minefield, really. So, as I'm sure you appreciate as well, it's so difficult.
It's 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 interesting to hear it from like a different type of course,
Yeah.
different view of. We had very much the same experience. I vividly remember on two occasions. So we were in our third year of our degree. I think we were in maybe the last 2 weeks of the course, and we
Right.
had a meeting with our tutors. And the meeting with our tutors was, what comes next? And this was the first time in 3 years any of our tutors had recognized or said anything about what you do after uni, what you should go into, how to get a job, how to do any of that. And
Oh,
we all sat there like,
crikey.
this is ridiculous. And then the other experience was we went to a job fair, which was big, and we a lot of engineering work in Lincolnshire, so a lot of the stalls there were around that. And there was one stall which was for Coca-Cola, and we went over and we were like, oh, well, what do you do? What's your background? And like, oh, well, we're looking for media students and all this kind of stuff. And we were like, well, what's your advice? What's your advice to kind of get into it? And they just said, move to London.
Oh gosh.
That's the only advice we got. And we're all stood there like, well, we can't afford to move to London. That's why we're at uni in Lincoln. So
Oh, it's just so offensive, isn't it?
yeah,
What on
it's
earth?
and
I
that's the
think
beauty of
think we did certainly on the HND course we did.
it.
I think there was maybe one or two classes, but it was really about interview techniques for going off to get a job within a creative establishment. Which is a very different mindset from freelance work, which is essentially what all creatives do at some level, whether it's part-time or full-time, and just to completely ignore all of that, how to run a business. And yeah, just move to London. Gosh, why
Just
didn't
move
I
to
think
London.
of that?
Just do that. Yeah. Just up and off you go when you've got your student debt and your no job. Just move to London.
Good
It's it.
God.
I think there's kind of like another side to it as well. Like obviously there's an industry side to it, but I think no course, regardless of what you go on, prepares you for the toll it takes mentally and
Yeah,
physically to do creative work because I think from an outside point of view, it's seen as an industry which is easy. It's seen as
Yeah, yeah,
it's a cop out course. It's something you do to fill the time. It's like, oh, very nice. You do paintings, you do illustrations. That's great. You get to sit down for 8 hours a day and draw. And then when you meet artists and you meet creators, and you're like, well, actually, no, all of us have pre-existing health conditions,
yeah.
mental health issues. We're just
Yes,
bags of
yeah,
mess at times. And
yeah,
you don't get taught any of that. You don't get told how to take care of yourself while you're
yeah,
doing things.
yeah, yeah.
It's
I
just
think the Association of Illustrators really kind of a few years ago did a kind of survey on that, and I'm not entirely sure what they did with the findings of that, but for once it felt really good to be heard, from the authority in the illustration fields, that even just to say, we're aware that there's a whole plethora of mental health issues out there, and this is a really tough industry, and it's something that affects everybody. And just to hear that was really refreshing, actually, because it's just ignored completely kind of usually. So you've reminded me, actually, I should look into that and see what they did with the findings.
it's always a balance to strike, and I think like even small things. I always find it strange when people question how much effort it takes to make something. Like with your work, it's working with polymer clay, so you're doing a lot of manual process, which isn't too different to what factory workers do in
Yeah,
a wider
yeah.
perspective. And people forget it, and they're like, oh well, why don't you make hundreds of these? You're like, well, because repetitive strain injury is
Well,
a thing.
exactly. I'm already dealing
Like,
with, back issues. I've got sciatica. I've got kind of arthritis. It's really, it's really difficult. And yeah, funnily enough, you saying that, I often, because I just make one figure at a time or one model at a time, and whenever I make one, people just assume I'm able to knock them out, kind of 100 at a go. It's just so fascinating. And I think the world of AI is only going to make, that even more difficult for creators. It's I think the average person just hasn't got a clue how much work really goes into something. It's yeah, it's really difficult. It's hard work.
I mean, I mean, like you say, you have health issues, which you have to balance that
Yeah,
passion versus how you're feeling any one day. Is
yeah.
is is that something you kind of feel like you've got a system for, or is that something which you take as like as it comes?
Um, Probably a bit of both. I was really, really healthy up until about 4 years ago, and I just had a really it was on Boxing Day, and I had this headache. And I say it was a headache, it was just like somebody poking my head, and it came up in the afternoon, and I thought that's weird, might be a hangover or something, and then the next day it was still there, and it was still there like 2 weeks later, and I thought this is really painful now. And I went to see my doctor, and with stuff like that, they're always so dismissive, aren't they? It was like, here's some, I think it was amytryptyline, which is something that kind of helps with muscular or nerve pain. And it didn't really help. And then the pain kind of worsened. You've got a nerve essentially called the occipital nerve that goes right up your scalp. And just eventually went, well, right up my scalp and right over and into my eye, and it was just so painful. And I think I spent around 2 weeks in bed at one point, and I was like, this just isn't right. My partner was really worried, and I was going to the doctor a lot, and every time it was like, God, it's this woman again, she's just like off her head. um and it
To
was
stay in the
just
NHS for anybody wondering, but
well, yeah, I do love the NHS, but crikey, if yeah, it's not something
yeah.
obvious. It's really difficult. And yeah, eventually, well, the pain went on for about 3 months in the end, and I was ended up with severe depression as a result because I just felt like I wasn't being listened to. My partner was so brilliant, and thankfully, and at that point, one of my friends had mentioned that her partner was diagnosed celiac, and it's gluten kind of. It's, I say gluten intolerance. It's more like I guess, an allergy to gluten. It's a autoimmune illness, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to cut out gluten and see if that helps. And miraculously, my headache disappears, and it did come back for a bit, and I thought, you know what? I think this is food related because cutting out gluten made such a drastic improvement, even if it was just for a little while. And I came across it's something called the autoimmune protocol diet, and it just basically is cutting out all inflammatory foods, and it's like a really kind of severe whole food diet essentially. And the plan is to eventually start reintroducing foods, but it just really sorted me out. And I just, yeah, I just have to be really, really careful with foods. And I got into my groove for a couple of years with that. I just thought, I'll just really try and stick to this. It was paleo diets in the end I was able to kind of gravitate towards, which was frustrating because I was vegetarian before. So it meant that I had to start eating meat, but needs must, unfortunately. I did,
What's first? Yep.
yeah, I did go through quite a lot of guilt with that, but I just wasn't getting any nutrition really otherwise. So um, yeah, I was kind of getting along groovy, and then 2 years ago, um, well, actually, firstly, I eventually got a diagnosis for this food thing, and it's a functional neurological disorder. So my symptoms are very kind of similar in a way to MS, but MS is when you're kind of your hardware of your brain, there's issues with that. But FND is describes it's issues with your software, so symptoms can be very similar. Because in the end, I was having a whole array of horrible symptoms, but with the restricted diets, I was able to really kind of deal with pretty much everything. But 2 years ago, I then got a histamine intolerance, so it means that I'm kind of allergic to more food now as a result. So um, I have to be really careful with raw foods. I can't eat any raw food now, which is a is a nightmare. And it just makes me have kind of a really swollen tongue and horrible burning sensations. So summer additionally can be a real issue because of the amount of pollen around. And I know that we had to reschedule this meeting today because I have to kind of avoid all that I can during August because with the additional pollen on top of kind of food and environmental issues, I have to be kind of really careful and really think about trying to minimize different kind of triggers really. So it's a really difficult illness to try and explain really, but because this I've got a double whammy going on, I have to be really careful in my whole day really with different triggers. So and I found that that has hugely impacted on my work, which is unfortunate. Thankfully, I've not reacted to polymer clay, so while I'm able to
You
use it,
you are there.
I'm
Still going,
using it.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that I feel really kind of blessed for. So yeah, it just meant that I've had to kind of really kind of roll back on work. Certainly, I'm hoping it's temporary and I'm able to kind of get more into a groove as time goes on, really. I have to be really mindful about, taking on gigs now and stuff, because if I take on a gig for a creative agency, you're looking at kind of 2 weeks kind of full on work, and at least, so that can be quite problematic because I don't know how I'm going to feel the next day, really. So I think now we're heading into winter, I'm going to kind of do a bit of a kind of mail out again and just see how it goes. But during the summer, I've had really quite a quiet period, really, and just kind of doing my own stuff. It's yeah, really difficult at times. But I think with being a creative and a creative person, it's nice because I find that you're not able to kind of dwell on things in the same way because I'm so busy with my own kind of projects and just trying to keep myself immersed in creative work. I find it really helps. I'm sure you're the same. It's that kind of creative outlet, isn't it? I think it's very easy to start kind of feeling depressed about things, but I really try and kind of focus on what I do have as opposed to any limitations, really.
It's that level of kind of catharsis and outlet it gives you. It's again, it's kind of one of them similar stories of I've had people on the show before. One of my friends who suffers with MS
Right.
is a painter, but kind of creates in seasons in a way. But is the way I'd
Yeah.
describe it is, you have these periods of longevity where you can't do anything, you're bedridden,
Yeah.
everything's going wrong, and then as soon as that ends, they're back on creating because it's all they've been thinking about during that period is I want to get up, I want to do things, I want to make things, but I can't. I know I can't, and I have to stop myself so that when it opens up again, I can go out, I can make what I want. And like you say, there's a lot at play, which I don't think some people realize of, like you say, of taking on jobs. If you don't know how you're going to feel, you won't be able to complete that job, especially if
Yeah.
it's a gig economy where it's one day you got to go film something, shoot something, draw something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then yeah, it's a whole other game of organization,
Yeah.
which yeah, not everybody has to deal with, luckily for some. But
No, no, absolutely. And it's something I'd never even thought about up until
mm,
kind of about 4 years ago. I was always really healthy, and I'm at the point now where I'm not doing too badly. I kind of jog every day. Every morning I try and get out for sort of 2 miles. Um, Now the pollen's not so bad, and I'm finding that doing yoga and Pilates and stuff kind of really help as well. It's all about kind of certainly in your because I'm in my late 40s now. It's really easy for things to feel like they're kind of seizing up, and that exacerbates any issues that you may have. So I find that trying to keep kind of moving and healthy and as much as I can kind of helps not only mental health but for me physically to be able to work really.
that's concerning to hear, though. I feel like I seize up most days, and I'm still mid-30s.
Yeah, get moving.
I had a friend of mine who had so the way I sit or the way I lay, they took a photograph of me from the side and they just sent me it, and my neck was at a right angle
Oh
compared to my body,
gosh.
and they were like, "Are you aware that this is how you sit?" And I looked at it, and I was like, I mean, I guess on some level I'm aware, but at the same time, that's the most comfortable position for me is just to let
Yeah.
myself slip into the cushion and my head goes forward, and that's where I end up sitting.
My partner's the same actually. Even at night when he's kind of on the sofa, it just looks so uncomfortable to me. It's like just
Just
the
slide
kind of
down, and then all
weirdest
of a sudden,
angle. But yeah, we're all so different, aren't we? It's really fascinating. I just don't know how on earth he'd find that comfortable, but yeah, he does.
stretching. You just get immersed in whatever you're watching. That's what
Yeah.
I find. You get drawing, you get watching. Being from an illustration, most of your time is just spent doing this anyway, where you're just looking straight down,
No,
and it
it's
just becomes
true,
habit.
isn't it? Yeah, I'm the
Yeah.
same with my clay desk and also even because I work with a tablet and a pen, and I just find I get kind of calluses and stuff. It's just, oh my God, aging is the worst, man.
It's funny you mentioned the calluses. I saw a video which was some TikTok or Instagram reel or something, and it was just something like, "Oh, if you're an artist, you probably have this." And I'm sort of thinking, well, this is just going to be one of those silly things which doesn't, it's saying, "Here's
Yeah,
my desk" or something like that, and they just showed their finger, and they were like, "You'll have a lump on your middle finger, just around
yeah.
there." And I was like, "No way, I haven't got that lump to my finger." I was like, "Yep, I have a lump, which I've never noticed before on my finger from years and years of just holding a pencil."
It's just insane, isn't it? Do yours not hurt? So they just kind of solid?
No, yeah, it's just very solid. It's almost like because it's never been like a callus, it's never rubbed or blistered
Right.
or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's literally just where the muscle is, or like the I guess maybe the calcium from the bone. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not a doctor
No,
has just
I don't know
developed, and I've got
actually.
like an
Yeah.
it's like an indent. But I noticed one on my pinky the other day, and I
Yeah,
was like,
I've got
oh
one there. I've got one in
yeah,
exactly the same place. It's just from where your, well, certainly for me, where my finger trails on the desk while I've got the
that's
tablet.
interesting. I
Yeah, and the
realized the other day
stylus.
I've got an indent just on this finger, and I was trying to figure out what it was, and then I realized I hold my phone
Yeah,
like this,
yeah, I've
and there's
I've had
bloody
exactly that, and I've stopped doing it now. They do go away, but no, I had exactly that. It's so
there's part of
weird,
me
isn't
which
it?
is
Because I don't
tempted to
think
see
you
how far
use
I can
it that.
take it. Like, could
If
I
you're
get a
like
finger
close
which is a hook?
encounters.
Just, like, how do you know? It's like I can hold phones and never have to worry about
Yeah, that's
it.
your superpower. Yeah. No, I
Prepping
hadn't
myself
thought
for the
about
future.
that, but mine hurt too much, so I couldn't
Right.
do it. But yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're fortunate if it doesn't hurt.
But it doesn't hurt for now. It is like I say, I'm aware at some point everything will break down further than it already has in many ways. But again, I think yeah, it's there's these all these sides to creating and kind of going back to what we were saying at the very beginning and the work you create of people look at it and they think it's this it's going to be easy it's because it's like a quite a cartoony bold style. People are like, oh, it's animation, it's got to be animation, and
Yeah,
you know or you'll be working for hours on stop motion or something like that or anything like that. The wider picture of what it takes to create becomes way more significant, and it's
yeah,
it's almost hard to get that out. And I think YouTube videos do a great job of that because it allows you kind of a platform to sit and chat about it.
yeah.
But social media wise, it doesn't, because it's the final product many times.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think I talked about that in a video not long ago that,
Mm.
I think it's almost a bit sneaky of, some creators to be like, look at this amazing thing that I've created, and you're forgetting kind of all the bad art that you've made along the way, really. And, all the time and, swearing and all the stuff that goes into creating it. And just feels like they kind of knock out something amazing every few days or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
depending on their discipline, but not actually sharing anything kind of real about it. And, I just, for me, it's more interesting to see the backstory for one. I love to kind of know how some things kind of come together, and hearing kind of horror stories, of how things haven't worked out, or, perhaps it's, ended up being something that you kind of really didn't see coming. Sometimes, for instance, I'll make a model and I'm trying to work on a likeness, and I think, that's not working out in a way that I wanted, but it kind of looks like somebody else. So I'm just going to make it into that person instead. So, it's just kind of little vignettes or little stories that I find really interesting. But I think not enough creators kind of share this kind of stuff, because for me, that's what makes the process kind of interesting. It's not always about the end result. You know, it's it's kind of the whole story. I think it's way more interesting than seeing kind of an image of something that's kind of final and complete, really.
I'm glad you mentioned that recent video. You spoke about making mistakes and what
Yeah,
you were
I always
doing and
make
all that kind of thing.
mistakes. Yeah.
But I watched that video and I found it so funny because you were working on it and your voiceover was just like, I did this bit and I wasn't particularly happy with it, and I was sat there going, it looked great, what you want about? It looks exactly like the person you're trying to make, and you're like, no, it doesn't. No,
No, I'll
something's wrong with
just
this. And I
squidge
was
it
like,
up now.
what are you doing? And I think it just exposed to me that again, just the idea of what the artist perceives versus what the public perceives can be so different. Like if you're not happy with it, you're not happy with it. That's
Yeah,
that's fair enough. And people get so focused on minute details and things which they are upset about within their creation, but when they show it to the public, like, yeah, this is great, this is
yeah,
what you want. And it's like like we're saying with social media, pumping things out 20 times a day is not attainable. for any person.
No,
So
no.
you kind of have to balance it between doing that and getting feedback on what you're creating to make sure,
Yeah,
you're not putting too much pressure on yourself for something which will stop you creating for 6 or 8 months, and still just trying to go, okay, well, I made this.
yeah,
It is what it is. Pushing it out.
yeah.
Yeah, it was
No,
a frustrating
I
video for me.
yeah, yeah. It's no, we all make bad art, and I think it's important to kind of share that and just yeah, different journeys. Isn't that more interesting than
Have you ever gone
have
back
this?
and corrected work? Like, let's say you've done something a few years later and you've thought, you know what, could maybe do it better. Or
Oh yeah, I've remade work
right.
entirely, and it's not to say that the previous version wasn't good enough or whatever.
Mm.
I just think as an artist, your style evolves so much as time goes on. Models that I make now look, I think, really different to, characters that I made 5 years ago. So to kind of keep your portfolio up to date for one, it's nice to have a sort of coherent kind of aesthetic, really. And I think for me, I wouldn't be kind of happy sharing stuff that I'm doing now alongside stuff that I did kind of way back. And it's frustrating because I've done some really great kind of commercial projects, but um, because they look so different to my own work, I'm just so reluctant to include them in my portfolio because I think for me it doesn't kind of make a whole lot of kind of sense really. For me, I like to see a sort of a certain kind of style, and I think having that mindset as well probably does come with its own limitations, however, because perhaps I'm scared of evolving further because I want to ensure everything kind of looks like my own brand. So
Mm.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, really. I think that's something that I need to really kind of think about. Is it
Yeah.
good to have a one kind of look for everything, or is it more interesting to have a kind of bit of a mixed bag? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I definitely think. I mean, I'd say I'm probably a prime example of I don't necessarily think of myself as having a brand or a style of one thing I do consistently.
Yeah,
I have various products which I do consistently. For instance, I make a calendar every year. That's exactly the same style whenever I do it, but I struggle to repeat work. I struggle to repeat the same style because every time I do, I feel like I'm ripping myself off. I'm
right.
looking at my
Yeah,
work and going, I've already done that. They've seen that. Don't need to worry
yeah,
about that. Job's done. Let's do something else. So when it comes to my next piece, I'm like, right, what can I do different? What can I change? And then you put that into the internet, you put that into the public eye, and it becomes very hard for people who are interested in your work, who saw one thing you did which they liked, to keep track of you because they can't keep that consistency, which is what they
yeah,
signed up for.
yeah.
Kind of like the show. This is probably the most consistent thing which I've done. Is it's
Mm.
basically the same format, has been since basically 2017, um, and this is the most consistent thing. But everything outside of that is just whatever takes my fancy. And I, to my audience is detriment in many ways. But at the same time, I'm very much like, well, yeah, but I'm going to do what I want to do.
Yeah,
It's not a
I
way to
think
make
that's a
money,
great.
I'd say.
No, well, yeah, it's I can see that, but there's a freedom in that, isn't there? And
Yeah,
it's kind of more truthful in a way because that's kind of more creative, I think, isn't it? To allow yourself to do what essentially what you want to do or what you kind of, you're drawn
yeah,
to doing rather than feeling kind of limited, perhaps.
yeah. I always tend to think of it as the reason I start creating in the first place was like we were saying before, was that level of catharsis. It's always been a way of expressing. It's always been a way of dealing with whatever was going on in my life at the time.
Yeah,
I've been lucky enough to find a consistent job which pays the bills,
yeah,
and been doing that for almost a decade. And that's just one side of my life. So this side of my life, I fundamentally refuse to have in any structure because this side of my life needs to be just catharsis. And I
yeah,
think I remember an old, my GCSE art teacher. used to tell the story of one of her students who said, I had an A-class student who was in my art class. She was amazing. She did everything she wanted. She was great, super talented. And then she went off to college and she did an accountancy degree.
Oh,
And they met a few years later and she said she was nothing but depressed.
yeah,
And she was like, don't fall into that trap. If you're going to go
yeah,
out and do something, you've got to allow yourself cathartic moments, because she'd stopped creating art completely because
yeah,
she was doing everything corporate. And my brain just clearly picked up on that when I was like 16 and thought, yep, that's nope, always got to make something. It's
yeah.
got to
It's
make
hugely
something.
important. I think
Mm,
I've done all sorts of jobs, but I think one thing that's been consistent is that I always made time, for drawing,
mm-hmm.
or, I do the odd kind of live drawing class here and there. And, I think for many people, that's their kind of one outlet, just to have a few hours a week, perhaps, just to be able to, do what they want to do, what they feel creatively drawn to doing. And, yeah, it's just so important. And it's, I don't know, I just really feel for people that, are obviously creative, but for whatever reason they just can't work in the fields, or, go to college or whatever. It's just heartbreaking, really.
I think it's almost the other side to what we were saying about when you go on courses and they don't teach you the fundamentals of how to survive
Yeah,
in the industry or anything like that. When we grow up and we're going through our whatever courses and are really learning, most of that is structured to this will get you a job. If you know algebra, this will get you a job.
yeah,
But none of it is focused on this will get you a job, but also here's how to enjoy life outside of that job.
yeah,
Because if you just do the job, you'll hate it in the end.
yeah,
And it's a very, I mean, what I was saying, most of what we've chatted about today was it's a balance. It's
yeah,
and you need that different perspective. And like you're saying, from a mature background going into education, or someone young who's encountering people who are older, it's we can learn from them as much as they can learn from us. And
oh,
that's
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I do all the time. It's just so much talent out there.
And they understand the algorithm in a way I never will.
Oh gosh, me too. Oh my gosh. YouTube is an enigma, isn't it?
I think we have the problem with YouTube. We saw it founded and we knew what it was,
Yeah.
and we were like, "That's what it is. That's how we use YouTube." And then years later, they
I
changed
just
it.
wish years ago I'd just gone with it and done something, because I started my channel, crikey, it must have been about 7 years ago. And yeah, it's frustrating when you put so much work into it and hardly anybody sees it, really. I think YouTube Shorts have been a little more successful for me, but I don't really want to be a YouTube Shorts creator. I'm more interested in long form. Um, yeah, it's tricky. If you find out what the magic solution to that is, let me let me know.
I'll try, but I also think it makes you, or at least from my point of view, it makes me cautious of embracing new platforms.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like I think TikTok's the prime example. But I'm not on TikTok. I haven't ever used the app because in my brain I'm like, well, I'll get on it and I'll learn what it's about, but that's going to take me a few months. That's going to take me a few
Yeah,
months to learn
yeah.
what it's about, and by that time they'll have changed what it's about and
Yeah.
moved on. So what's the point in
They're
me
so
even
cheeky,
starting?
aren't they? I started TikTok maybe around 6 weeks ago, 2 months
Mhm.
ago, maybe, and it just feels like a massive waste of time. I think everybody seems established on there already, and if you're a latecomer to any of these things, it's so difficult to get a like. It's
You kind of just have to wade into it. I recently what's the new one? I recently joined Blue Sky, which is
Oh
kind of like
yes, yeah, I
the
have
Twitter
too as well.
replacement. I abandoned Twitter or X or whatever he wants to call it
Yeah,
these days.
me too. It's just horrendous now, isn't it? Awful.
Deleted all that. Joined Blue Sky, and I was like, "This is interesting." Right at the beginning of it, you got to have a code to get in and everything like that. But
Yeah,
secretly in the back of my brain, I was like, 3 months time, this is going to be every single platform again.
yeah,
Trying
yeah.
to get that one viral joke, which will make me go in the first 2 months. and then I'll give up. I'll move on, carry on doing what I'm doing.
No, it's frustrating. It's just it takes so much time and energy and effort, all of this, doesn't it? Are you on Mastodon, Graham? That's something I'm really enjoying.
So I was,
Yeah,
and then I kind of I was still on Twitter at the time, and then I joined Mastodon as like I could potentially move over to Mastodon. And
yeah,
same with Threads. I joined Threads and was like, well,
yeah, me
see
too.
what's
And I
going on
can't
here.
be bothered with it.
And it was just the learning curve was so high, and I was having to maintain so many different fronts. It felt like,
Yeah,
I was having to repost the same content to so many platforms that I decided, right, I'm going to cut it back and got rid of Mastodon, got rid of Twitter because I didn't like where the platform was kind of going anyway.
no,
And I was like, I'm going to stick with the visuals. I'm going to stick with YouTube, as redundant as I think it is at times. Stick
yeah,
with Instagram and just see how that goes and kind of approach it from that point of view. And I joined Blue Sky just because most of my friends are on Blue Sky of
yeah.
getting them updates and using it essentially how I'd use MySpace back in the day. just
Oh,
I've
MySpace,
gotten
I
to that
wish they'd
point.
bring it back.
It still exists. It's just music now. There's just loads of
Oh,
bands in it.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
It just seems such a
it's
friendly place, you know. When you
yeah.
consider what on earth Twitter is now, it's do you know the thing that made me leave Twitter, and this is utterly ridiculous, well, along with everything else, because it's so
Mhm.
awful there.
Yeah.
I complained to Listerine, you know, the mouthwash people,
Yeah. Yeah.
about their tops are really hard to open. So I just had like this really innocuous tweet to them to say, you know, because you really figure out your tops because they're really hard to open. And that was months ago. And then some, I don't know, incel creep a few weeks ago was started going on about like, you know, what kind of idiot are you? You can't open an
Yes.
effing Listerine cap. And I was like, is this really where we are now at Twitter? You can't even moan to Listerine about mouthwash caps without
Such a
some,
such an
you
odd
know, right
place.
wing incel.
Yeah.
And why on earth would he be looking for that tweet? Because it was months old.
Yeah. How did you find it? Like, what were you searching? Were you just on the Listerine profile? Like, I'm gonna reply to everything. Just anything.
So,
I
you know, I just took that as my moment to leave. I still
Yeah.
have my Twitter account there because I didn't want to give up my handle, but I don't use
Right.
it now at all.
Yeah.
It's just horrendous. What a shame.
It's
I used to love
I mean,
Twitter.
it's I the main thing I ended up using Twitter for was, like you say, contacting companies. I
Yeah.
found customer service were actually on Twitter, which was one of the prime examples. It's a bit of a tangent. Was so I when I moved out to the US, student loans company wanted me.
I
They were
bet.
trying to find me
Yeah.
because of course. Um, and I didn't want to pay for a bolt-on for my phone to ring the UK
Yeah.
because I'm not here. I was like, how can I contact them? You can contact them from Twitter chat. That's
Ooh,
their main way of being contacted in the UK
right.
was through Twitter direct messaging. And I was like, this is you're a you're a bank essentially, and I'm contacting you through Twitter.
It's awful.
Um, so once I was done with that and I was tidied away and set up on all accounts and all payments and all that, I was like, right, okay, I can actually get off Twitter now. I don't have to do this.
Yeah,
But if I
yeah.
ever need to my student loans company again, I might have to download. But what actually made me delete my account was the name change.
Oh, it's awful, isn't it?
I
What
was
is
so
he
fickle.
doing?
It seemed like kind of thing like an edgy teen does. It's like we're gonna call it
It's
X.
just embarrassing. You know, he's like the worst of the 90s, basically, isn't he? He's so awful.
The thing I love about that now is whenever you read a news report about it, it's X, formerly known as Twitter,
Yeah.
on every news
He
article.
can't get rid of it.
You're never gonna get away with it because no one knows
No.
what this is.
Oh, I just really hope it all kind of messes up proper and he has to sell it to somebody with a clue. But I know that's not going to happen.
It'll either close or it'll get shut down. It's
Yeah.
the only way I can see it. Um,
Yeah.
but this is a bit of a tangent. But
It
otherwise,
is.
the art
I'm just
industry is
very aware I've
volatile.
moaned about everything. I've moaned
That's
about
what
so
we're here
much
for.
today. It is catharsis, isn't it?
Dave Zakin, who I had on recently, he's a ceramicist, does pottery and whatnot. He described podcasts as therapy. They're like
Yeah.
free therapy. You come, you chat, you have a little bit of catharsis, and You
Well,
learn a bit about what you're doing.
it's been a great experience. It's my first podcast, so hopefully it's I just very conscious that I've moaned quite a lot. But
If I
I'm
said
sure
anything, we could be sued over, so we're fine.
no, that's true. That's all that
That's the way
matters.
forward. Okay. But it's been lovely to speak to you, Lily.
And
Hopefully,
you,
we'll
Graham, thank
see
you.
more creations coming out of your way soon. And anyone will check you out. I'll leave links down below as usual
Thank
to all our
you.
thing. And yeah, if we're all wrapped up, we'll call it there.
Yeah, and I shall carry on listening to Yelling at Concrete. So yeah, congrats on a great podcast. Actually, it's nice to have these just voices that I enjoy in the background, even if I'm not absorbing kind of what they're saying. So I shall keep you on play.
Thank you. Other people should too. But on that note,
Yeah.
we will talk to these guys later.